Hi, I'm Chris, and welcome to The Compulsive Hobbyist. Part of being a compulsive hobbyist is that I tend to follow my hobbies wherever they may take me, wherever my interest may latch on. And this holds true for music as much as anything else, and in some ways even more so. Case in point, the Distance video series that I'm working on. One of the steps that I was going to have to take was recording the synth part, which is a very straightforward part played on the keyboard. But rather than just grabbing a ready-made synth patch and playing it straight up, I ended up digging into the actual Minimoog and figuring out how to make the sound. But from there, I really dug in a little bit into the history of the sound. So that's just kind of the way my mind works. And in some ways, I'm more of a music technician than I am a musician at this point. I'm interested in how to make the sounds, how to put the sounds together in addition to playing them. And especially in this particular part, since I'm not a keyboardist, I really can't show you how to play the keyboard because I don't really know. But what I can do, and what I enjoy doing, is exploring how to make things work, which to me is even more fun sometimes when I don't necessarily know the right way to do it. So what you're about to see is not necessarily the best way or the right way, but it is a way, and I think the end result is pretty good. So we'll leave it at that and cut to the workstation. So we're back here in my DAW Cakewalk, looking at the tracks for Cake's The Distance. If you haven't seen my previous videos building up to this, the first video in the series shows how I created the backing track using recordings I took from Ultimate Guitar, which was very helpful just in sketching out the basic, the structure of the track. And from that I also created the various sections of the song here. These are just kind of like notes for my own reference when I'm looking back at these waveforms to kind of get oriented on which bars fall into which parts of the song. I find this to be very useful, just to not get lost in looking at these various waves here. And I've enabled just a scratch guitar take that I put down because I haven't finished recording all the actual guitar parts. So this is not the completed guitar part you're going to hear in the background. It's really just there as a placeholder. And today I'm going to be adding a new track for the keyboard part. The way I'm going to be recording this is actually going to be multiple keyboard parts. So the focus for this video is what actually originally was a keyboard, or more specifically a synth part, that sort of Dr. Dre G-funk whistle sound, which is very distinctive. You'll recognize it as soon as you hear it if you don't know what I'm talking about. And I'll go into just a little bit of the history on that because I find that to be very interesting. But before I digress too far down that path, what I'll do is I'll just get the initial track set up, and then we can dig a little bit more into the keyboard itself. So let me hide my. I'll be doing this just an Arturia Mini Lab, probably $100 ish MIDI controller, very straightforward. And I'm not going to be doing much on here because it's a very simple part. So for now, I'm just going to hide this. And we're going to add a new track here. In this case, it's a MIDI instrument track. And I'm going to pick an instrument. In what I will be using, when I bought the Arturia Mini Lab, it came with a few licenses for some Arturia products. I'm not here to sell Arturia. I just thought it was a pretty good deal. It came with the Mini V3, which is Arturia's version of the Moog Mini synthesizer, as well as a couple different plugins. We've got this is, I think, a Rhodes, and the Analog Lab, or two different versions of the Analog Lab, which is Arturia's kind of VST sound banks. So it's a good deal. But if you don't have this, there are a bunch of other Moog Mini free VST emulators out there. I am not familiar with them. I have taken a quick look, and I can see that there are a bunch of them out there. I'm pretty confident that anything I'll be doing in this video, you'll be able to do with one of them. And the beauty of using an established instrument like the Moog Mini is that the controls should be essentially the same no matter which plugin you're using. So I'm selecting the Mini V3, and I'm going to create it here. And if I click on this button here, this is going to bring up the actual Mini V3. So this is an emulator of a Moog Mini keyboard. Now, I am not a keyboardist. I am not trained on synthesizers or piano or really anything else. I've just learned a little bit about this from some YouTube videos, and it's something that I find very interesting. I am interested in the electronics aspects of this, and I do think at some point I'm going to get some sort of a hardware. Behringer has an inexpensive clone of not the whole keyboard, but the actual synth components, which you can then manage with an external synth keyboard. I may pick one up. It's only a couple $100. There's a really interesting and deep rabbit hole in Eurorack, which are individual modules that you can string together to create really an infinite number of I don't even want to call them sounds. I mean, it's way more complex than that, and I am not prepared to do any of the complexity justice because it is a deep, deep subject. Maybe I'll get into that at some point. And I'm also interested just in the very simple electronics aspects of the oscillators, which you can dabble with a little bit on these emulators, and I'll get into that briefly. But you can also, I think there's some interesting electronics projects to be had there. So we'll see where that leads. I'm going to open just a very basic preset here, which is a single oscillator. We'll add to that. And before I start playing around with that, I'm going to add a couple of plugins here. These are some free third-party plugins. There's an oscilloscope plugin here, which we'll look at. You don't need to use this for what we're doing here. This is just for fun. And a frequency analyzer plugin, because I am a geek. My cousin made a comment on my first music YouTube video saying something along the lines of, I had no idea music was so nerdy. And my response is, you have no idea how nerdy it gets. This is just scratching the surface. But yeah, once you have an oscilloscope and a frequency analyzer out in order to do a cover of a Cake song, you're going down the rabbit hole. So anyways, let's just see what we got here. This should automatically be armed, so we should be able to play something. All right, so right out of the box, what do we have? A very simple sawtooth pattern here. You can see it right here. And if I bring down the frequency analyzer here, I'm not really going to be interpreting the spectrum analyzer other than to show when you change these waveforms what it does to the spectrum. So if I switch this over to triangular, which is as close to a sine wave, a typical typical sound wave type pattern. Then as you switch the waveform, you get a saw triangular, sawtooth, square, rectangular. So why did I show you all that? Really just for fun, because as I said, I am a geek. And then we are changing the frequency ranges here. So that's just with a single oscillator. And if we bring in a second oscillator here, we can now mix and match. We can now mix and match. And we can independently change the frequencies of the second oscillator. So what it's really doing here is each oscillator is just, in a real synth, is converting DC to AC, and then the way it does the waveforms, and I'm speaking out of my depth here, but what I've gleaned from some recent learning in a related area, ham radio electronics. Again, that's another geek rabbit hole there. The waveforms are created by filtering out or letting in various higher order harmonics of the base waveform. So that's as far as I'm going to go into that. I'm not pretending to understand all this. I'm just kind of regurgitating bits of information. But this is pure geekery right here. And what I'm going to do here is actually way simpler than the stuff I'm showing you, because I am now going to just copy from another YouTube channel here. This is actually from a reverb video. I'm going to post the link to it in my description here, actually giving us a cheat sheet on how to get the Dr. Dre Nothing But a G thing, the whistle synth sound. I've copied this in the past. Well, initially I tried to emulate it to get there myself by some trial and error and reading some forum posts and just general guides, and I got close. But this guide here is a good starting point that gets me closer. What we're going to do is, for our first oscillator, we're going to bring the range all the way up, and the second oscillator also all the way up. The third oscillator is actually going to be off for this one. We're not going to use it, but you can bring in the third oscillator as a third oscillator, and I believe you can also use it for LFO effects, for like to get a warble. We won't be doing that today though. Now we want the first oscillator on, second oscillator on, third one will be off. The first oscillator will actually be in a sawtooth, and the second in a square. And we're going to leave the semitone right up at 12 o'clock there. The bass oscillator tune will be at 12 o'clock. We're going to bring the glide. This is very important for that G-funk sound. It's going to be brought up to right about there. We'll leave the 3 off. It's not doing anything. We're going to turn on our glide and our decay, and I believe we're going to be turning off our legato. Volumes are going to be all the way up for the 2 oscillators here. Filter modulation is going to be off, keyboard control on, and now we're going to adjust our modifiers. Again, I can't really explain exactly what it's doing here. At this point, I am just blindly copying the reverb guide. So if you want to learn more about this, I suggest definitely giving that a look. Okay, and two additional settings I missed were oscillator modulation. You want to have this off, and you want unison to be on, and you can adjust your output volume here. Now, in order to get up to the sort of that G-funk range, it's like this and like that and like this. So if you're hitting, you still have that sort of key impact sound, but if you're smoothly flowing between the notes, that's where you get that glissando. And that sound, I think of it being, a kid of the 80s. I think of it as being Dr. Dre, Nothing But a G Thing, from that West Coast hip hop sort of thing. That's what I associate with it. So when I hear, Cake using it, I'm hearing that as a direct callback to Dr. Dre. But some of these sounds, even though this was absolutely, in original use in hip hop, the sounds were taken from 70s funk, Parliament, Funkadelic. If you listen to Flashlight, Aqua Boogie, these sounds came from a guy or genius, I should say, by the name of Bernie Worrell. And I have only recently learned about Bernie, even though he passed away several years ago. Bernie was a classically trained pianist. I'm looking at his obituary here, and he started classical piano lessons at 3, composed a piano concerto when he was 8, and performed with the Washington Symphony Orchestra of Pennsylvania when he was 10. All right, this is where this sound came from, and this guy was absolutely a cornerstone of the Parliament Funkadelic sounds. But he also he performed with Talking Heads. If you haven't seen it, look up the live version of Burning Down the House, which I believe was from the movie Stop Making Sense. Bernie's up on stage with the Talking Heads. It's just an amazing performance. And I was completely unaware of his influence until very recently. So that's one of the things that I find so satisfying about learning about music is anything you dig into, you're gonna learn about the individuals, their influences, how music, even within our own lifetimes, has really just transformed. The last 50 years of music, how much has changed. And it's these little things that I feel like I'm just scratching the surface on. And I could do a deep dive into this, not because I'm knowledgeable in it, but because I would like to learn so much more about it. And if people are interested, maybe I will. But for now, we're going to do something a lot more simple, and we're going to try to use this sound to record the keyboard part of Cake's The Distance. So their version is probably not exactly these settings or exactly this tone, but I like this tone. So if we bring our handy The Distance cheat sheet over and go over to the synth here, you see there's really not a lot to it. Okay, we're not going to look at this in Guitar tab here. Let's go to our settings here. Change to standard tablature. All right, so I wouldn't say I have that down, but I'm going to follow the method I did with the previous guitar video, where the DAW is helpful in a little bit of trial and error. So if I don't get it right the first time, I can retry it, and once I have it down, then I'm good. And I'm going to unapologetically, once I get this down once, I'm going to copy and paste it. I'm not going to try to, I'm not a keyboard player, as I think you can see. So what we're going to do here real quick is I'm going to get oriented within the song where this kicks in. And if we take a look here, we're going to see that it runs from, it looks like the 22nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And then it repeats again, and it repeats some more through the outro. So it's really the second half of the chorus. Second half of the chorus and the outro. So 22 through 25. So I'm going to go here right before the 22nd measure, and I'm going to arm this one to record. And this is going to take me multiple attempts, which I won't subject you to in the video. If it looks like I'm doing this right the first time, I promise you I'm not. I just don't think you want to see all my trial and error. Okay, that's pretty close. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to our piano roll view here, make sure that our track is highlighted. I've already zoomed in here, so we can actually see the notes that we're playing here. So this is our timeline, left to right, just following this same left to right sequence, and there are our notes. So we're going to see here where I think I fumbled a note. So let's go back. So one thing we're going to do here, all right, so I double hit this note here, so I want to get rid of that. So I'm going to go select and get rid of them. So maybe I left this trailing note a little too long. I can always adjust it. So if I just click, I can drag and drop it like that. So the glissando on this one's a little messed up, and I'll be honest, I don't know how to improve the glissando without re-recording here, but we're going to try something like this to see if it's any better. Oh, there we go. So we really just want to make sure that these notes are overlapping, and then it's the VST plugin itself then gives us that nice glide between the notes here. So I think we're pretty close. Okay. There we go. So that's pretty good. Now I'm not going to try to re-record that each time. It's for me not worth the effort because I'm never going to play this live on the keyboard. This is just, again, for fun, for learning. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to go now to the, let's zoom out so we can get better oriented here. So it's the second half of the chorus. So we're going to go to our second chorus now. And this is going to run, I think, longer. So for the first chorus, it's 4 bars. Second chorus, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to go twice, 44, 45, 46. It's going to start on the 47th. we're going to insert right here. And then we're going to do the same thing up here on the 50th, so the 51st. All right, let's see how this sounds. All right, and we've got to do this again. We're going to go now to the 44, 45, 46th of, oh no, sorry. We're going to go now to the 59th. All right, so we're going to go back to the 59th. So right at the beginning of our outro, and we're going to paste it a few times here. I'm going to go to the 63rd. All right, that didn't quite line up where it should have because I didn't put it in the right place. So let me make sure that these are starting at the right place. This is 5901. I pasted this a little too far over. There we go. All right, and then for that final trailing note here, what I think I'm going to do is extend it out just a little bit. I think it drags out just a tiny bit at the end. So let's just, no, not the whole thing. Undo. I'm going to click on just this note. All right, I think that's better. So that's basically it. We've got, you know, a non-keyboardist who doesn't own a synthesizer, has never actually learned how to play a synthesizer, just with a free for me plugin. And again, I'm sure you can find an absolutely equivalent plugin for free online if you don't have an Arturia instrument. I'm sure you can get it sounding every bit as good as this. And really just a little bit of trial and error, a little bit of fumbling around to get the pattern, and a little bit of cheating by fixing my flubs in a way that I can't easily do with an acoustic, or I should say an analog instrument like the guitar. Now that I have this in a digital format, I can completely manipulate it, fix my mistakes, and sound like I actually at least somewhat know what I'm doing, even if I don't. So after coming back to this and giving the Minimoog a listen, both in my version and the original, I think it's lacking a little something. It sounds just a little too flat. So let's give it one more listen here. So I went in and gave it a little bit of reverb. In this case, I'm using a plate reverb plugin, again from Arturia, but it really doesn't matter which reverb you use. You can get different effects from different types of reverbs. It's really a matter of just trial and error and playing around with it. And I didn't want it to be too much. Just give it a little bit of a warble. So if I turn it back on here. I think it helps, and I will go back and fine tune it some more, because again, you can always go back in and bring the instrument back up and play with it and tweak it. So I may adjust the glide a little bit here. You really just have to find the sweet spot, But you know, once it's recorded and once you've tweaked the note placement, it doesn't mean that that your work is done. Sometimes you really have to come back and listen to it again. You know, a day or two later. In this case, it's the next day, and it's still not quite there. But it's a foundation. It's something I can build on. So anyways, hopefully you got something out of that. The next of the videos I'll be working on for this series will be the bass part, but because I haven't actually really started working on that yet, that might not be the next one that's published. It could be that the next one that's published will be the next keyboard part, which is actually going to be the horns. And that will be a little bit more... probably a little bit more challenging because there's a couple of dynamics going on with that. There's variable muting going on with the real trumpets, as well as pitch bends. So I'm sure I can find a plugin that will do that, but then it's going to be a matter of me working out the coordination for the playing and the two virtual mod wheels for the muting and the bends. At least that's what I think will go into it. We'll find out when I actually get into it. Anyways, I hope to see you all there, and remember, we're all learning.